The plastic basin hit the marble floor, and the sound cracked through the entire lobby of Mercylight Specialist Hospital like a slap. Dirty mop water spread in a slow grey river across those expensive tiles, and for a moment, nobody moved. An old woman in a faded wrapper and cracked rubber slippers stood frozen in the middle of it, her hands still shaking from where the young doctor had shoved past her. 30 people watched. Patients in the waiting area, nurses behind the desk, 2 security men by the door, and not one of them stepped forward to help her up. "Are you blind?" the doctor snapped, brushing an invisible stain off his designer coat. "Ordinary cleaner. You people carry the stench of poverty everywhere you go. Do you know how much this hospital is worth? And they let things like you walk through the front entrance." He looked at her the way a man looks at something he scraped off his shoe. The old woman said nothing. She only knelt there in the dirty water, gathering her fallen rags, her old hands trembling, her eyes lowered. And the crowd, the educated, well-dressed, comfortable crowd, simply watched her suffer in silence. What none of them knew, what not one single person in that proud building could have imagined, was that the trembling old woman on the floor owned every brick, every machine, and every salary in that hospital. She had come that morning to watch, to see, with her own eyes, who in Mercylight still remembered how to treat a human being like a human being. And she was about to find her answer in the most unexpected person of all. Before we go further, do this old woman a small kindness. Tap like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now grab something to drink, settle in, and let me show you what happened next. The doctor's name was Dr. Stanley Maduka. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and expected the air itself to rearrange for him. His father sat on 3 medical boards in Lagos. His shoes cost more than the cleaner earned in 2 months. And on that Tuesday morning, with mop water soaking into the old woman's wrapper, he had no idea he was being weighed on a scale he could not see. "Clean this up before someone important slips and breaks their neck," Stanley said. "And next time, use the back corridor like your kind is supposed to." He stepped over the spreading water, careful with his expensive shoes, and walked toward the doctor's lounge without looking back once. The old woman stayed on the floor. That was when a side door swung open and a young nurse came through it, carrying a tray of medication charts. Her name was Adaeze. Her uniform was clean but old, washed so many times the blue had faded to the color of a tired sky. Her shoes were the cheap rubber kind that squeaked on wet tiles. And the moment she saw the old woman kneeling in dirty water with 30 people watching her like she was a film, something in Adaeze's chest simply refused to stay quiet. She put the tray down on the desk. She did not look at the crowd. She crossed the wet floor and knelt right there in the mess in her clean uniform and put her arm around the old woman's shoulders. "Mama, Mama, easy now. I have you. Don't try to stand yet. Let your knee settle first." Adaeze's voice was soft, but it carried. "Who did this? Who pushed you down and left you on the floor like this?" "It is nothing, my daughter," the old woman whispered. "I am managing. These old bones are used to the ground." "No, Mama, it is not nothing." Adaeze gently wiped the woman's wet hands with the edge of her own apron. "Nobody should be left on the floor, nobody. Come, hold my arm. We will stand together, small, no rush." A nurse behind the desk hissed at her. "Adaeze, leave that woman and bring those charts. Ward 4 is waiting. You want matron to query you again because of a cleaner." Adaeze did not even turn her head. "Ward 4 can wait 2 minutes. This is a human being on the floor." The crowd watched a different film now. They watched a poor nurse in faded shoes lift an old cleaner out of dirty water with more tenderness than most of them showed their own mothers. Adaeze walked her slowly to a bench, sat her down, and crouched in front of her. "Are you in pain anywhere, Mama? Your hip? Your back? Look at me. Did your head touch the ground when you fell?" "No, my daughter." He pushed my shoulder, not my head. "I am fine. You are not fine. You are shaking." Adaeze pressed 2 fingers lightly to the inside of the old woman's wrist, counting without thinking, the way a trained nurse does. The pulse was fast. Fear, not injury. She had felt that exact rhythm 1,000 times. Your heart is racing because they frightened you. That is normal. Breathe with me, in through the nose, slow. Out through the mouth, slower. Good. Again. The old woman breathed, and as she breathed, she studied the young nurse's face, the way a jeweler studies a stone nobody else has noticed. What is your name, my daughter? Adaeze, Mama. Sister Adaeze, they call me on the ward, but you can just call me Adaeze. Adaeze. The old woman tested the name like she was tasting it. Daughter of a king. Do you know that is what your name means? Adaeze laughed, a small, tired laugh. My father used to say that, Mama. He said it every time we had nothing to eat. Adaeze, hold your head up. You are the daughter of a king. Then he would give me his own share of the food. She stopped. Something moved across her face, and she pushed it down. He is late now, but I still hold my head up. It costs nothing to be kind, and it costs nothing to stand straight. The old woman was quiet for a long moment. Bring me water, she finally said. Not for me, for your own throat. You have been running since morning. I can hear it in your voice. Mama, I am supposed to be taking care of you. And who takes care of the one who takes care of everybody? Eh? Go and drink water, my daughter. Then go to your ward 4 before that woman reports you. Old as I am not going anywhere. I will sit here and watch the world. Adaeze fetched her a cup of water anyway, made sure she drank it, made sure the security men knew the old woman was to be left in peace, and only then picked up her charts and hurried toward Ward 4. She did not know she had just changed the entire direction of her life. She only knew that her knees were wet and her shift had barely started. The old woman watched her go. Then she took a small, very old wristwatch out of her wrapper, looked at the time, and smiled to herself. Her name was Mama Ezin. Everyone in the city called her Grandma Ezin, and she was not a cleaner. 31 years earlier, Ezin Nwankwo had buried her husband and used the small compensation money from his death to open a 4-bed clinic in a rented bungalow. She had cleaned the floors herself in those days. She had washed the bed sheets herself. She had held the hands of dying strangers at 2 in the morning because there was no one else to do it. From the 4-bed clinic grew a 6-bed clinic, then a 20-bed hospital, then a teaching hospital, and finally Mercylight Specialist Hospital, one of the most respected private hospitals in all of Lagos, worth more money than Ezin ever let herself count. But somewhere in those 31 years, the floors she once scrubbed had been covered in marble, and the people who walked on that marble had forgotten what the floors were made of, forgotten what the hospital was for, forgotten the 4-bed clinic and the dying strangers at 2 in the morning. 3 months before that Tuesday, Ezin's only son and his wife, Adaeze's parents in another version of this story, but here Ezin's own son and daughter-in-law, had died together. Not Adaeze's, Ezin's. Let me say it plainly so there is no confusion, because this part matters. Ezin had one son. That son married, had one boy, and then the son and his wife died in a road accident on the Lekki Expressway, struck by a petrol tanker that lost its brakes. The boy they left behind was named Emeka. Emeka Nwankwo was 29 years old now. He was a doctor, trained in London, brilliant with his hands and quiet with his words. He was also, on paper, the heir to everything his grandmother had built. The board of Mercylight had been waiting for 3 months for him to step forward and take his place as the medical director of the hospital. The whole staff buzzed about him. Nobody had met him. Nobody had seen his face. He had been abroad finishing his surgical fellowship, and the legend of him had grown in his absence until it became something almost unreal. They say he is so handsome women faint, the nurses whispered in the changing room. They say he is richer than the governor. They say when he finally comes, he will choose his own team and only the best will survive. And Grandma Ezin, sitting at home 3 months in mourning, reading every report that came across her desks, watching the hospital she built from a distance, had grown sick at heart, not from grief alone, from what the grief had let her see. With her son gone, she had finally looked closely at the empire she was leaving behind, and she had not liked what she found. This hospital has money, she said to her oldest friend and lawyer, Barrister Okonkwo. It has machines, it has famous doctors, but it has lost its heart, Okonkwo. The poor are treated like dirt in the very place I built to lift them up, and my grandson is about to inherit a beautiful building with a rotten soul. Then fix it, Ezin. You are the chairman. Fire whoever you want. Firing teaches nothing. Fear is not the same as character. She had stared out of her window for a long time. No. Before Emeka takes over, I must know two things. I must know who in that hospital still has a human heart. And I must know that my grandson will not be alone, that there is someone beside him who will love him for the boy he is, not the empire he carries. I have seen what money does to love, Okonkwo. I watched it eat my own brother alive. I will not let it eat my grandson. And how will you find such a person? Put an advertisement in the newspaper? No. A slow, dangerous smile. I will become invisible. The rich never see the poor. So I will become poor, and then I will see everything. That was how Grandma Ezin came to be kneeling in mop water on a Tuesday morning, dressed as a cleaner, watching 30 comfortable people decide she was not worth helping. And that was how she found Adaeze. But she was not the only one who had gone into Mercilite wearing a disguise. 2 weeks before, a new doctor had quietly joined the surgical residency rotation. A junior man, soft-spoken, careful, the kind nobody pays attention to because he never pushes to the front. He carried his own files, he ate alone in the canteen. He took the night shifts no one wanted. His ID badge said Dr. Emeka Obi, junior resident, and everyone assumed Obi was his surname and that he was nobody important. His name was not Obi. Obi was his mother's maiden name, borrowed for the badge. He was Emeka Nwankwo. He was the heir. And before he sat in the director's chair his grandmother had kept warm for him, he wanted to know one thing for himself. What did Mercilite feel like from the bottom? How did the great hospital with his family name on the wall treat the people who could do nothing for it in return? He had been finding out for 2 weeks, and what he had found had been turning his stomach. On his second night in the residency, Emeka had watched Dr. Stanley Maduka send an old man home from the emergency unit because the man could not pay the deposit. The old man had chest pain. Crushing, central chest pain that spread into his left arm, the kind any first-year medical student is taught to take seriously, because it is the language the heart uses when it is dying. The man's grandson had brought him in on the back of a motorcycle. They had 4,200 naira between them. The deposit was 60,000. No deposit, no admission, Stanley had said, not even looking up from his phone. This is a private hospital, not a charity. Take him to the general hospital. Doctor, please, his chest, he cannot breathe well. Please, doctor. Then carry him fast. Stanley had waved them away like flies. Emeka, standing in the corner in his junior badge, had quietly followed them out. He had pressed his own card into the grandson's hand and told the triage nurse on the night shift to admit the man under observation and bill the cost to him, personally, no questions. The man had been having a real heart attack. They caught it because somebody bothered to look. He lived. Stanley never knew. He never even remembered the old man's face. That was the hospital Emeka had inherited. A place where your heartbeat mattered less than your bank balance. And he had decided, somewhere around that second night, that he was not going to fix it with a memo from a director's office. He was going to learn it from the floor up, the way his grandmother had built it, and then he was going to tear the rot out by the roots. He just did not expect to meet Adaeze. It happened on the medical ward 3 days after the lobby. A patient was crashing, an elderly woman, post-operative, her blood pressure sliding, her breathing going shallow and fast. The intern on duty froze. Emeka was passing with the chart, stopped, and at the exact same moment, a nurse came running with the emergency trolley already half prepared, oxygen in hand, her eyes calm and her movements fast. It was Adaeze. Her sats are dropping, she is at 88 on room air, Adaeze said, slipping the oxygen mask over the patient and turning the flow up in one smooth motion. I checked her 2 hours ago and she was fine. This is sudden. Doctor, I don't like this. Her calf was swollen this morning, the left one. I noted it, but nobody reviewed it. Emeka's head snapped up, sudden shortness of breath. Fast heart rate, falling oxygen. A swollen calf from days of lying still after surgery. He knew exactly what she was describing, and it frightened him, because she was right. You're thinking a clot, he said quietly. A clot that broke off from the leg and traveled to the lung. Pulmonary embolism, Adaeze said, meeting his eyes. I am only a nurse, doctor. I cannot diagnose. But I have seen it before, and I have seen it missed before, and I will not stand here and watch it be missed again. We need to act now, not after the morning round." For a moment they just looked at each other, the junior resident nobody noticed, and the poor nurse in faded shoes, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with romance, and everything to do with recognition. Two people who actually cared, finding each other in a building full of people who had stopped. "Then we act now," Emeka said. "Get me the senior registrar on call. Tell them suspected PE. I want a clinical assessment, and we escalate immediately. Keep her oxygen up. Sit her upright. Keep monitoring those SATs out loud. You and me, we don't leave her." They saved the woman's life that night, not with a miracle, with attention. With the simple, unglamorous life and death habit of noticing a swollen calf and refusing to wait until morning. Afterward, at almost 3 in the morning, they sat in the empty nurse's station drinking terrible vending machine tea, both of them too wired to feel tired yet. "You knew exactly what it was," Emeka said. "Most residents don't move that fast on a pee." How? Adaeze wrapped both hands around the paper cup. "My father," she said it simply. "He had the same thing, after a small operation on his leg. He was at home, recovering, and one evening he stood up and said his chest felt tight, and by the time we reached the hospital it was too late. I was 19. I held his hand in the back of a taxi, and I felt the exact moment he stopped holding mine back." She took a sip of the tea like it was nothing. "So I went to nursing school, on a scholarship from a small foundation, a tiny one. They only take 2 students a year, and I made myself a promise. I would learn that thing that killed my father so well that I would never, ever miss it in somebody else's father. That is all I am, doctor. A girl who refused to let the same thing happen twice." Emeka was quiet. He had trained at one of the best hospitals in London. He had stood beside professors who had written the textbooks. And he was sitting in a Lagos nurse's station at 3 in the morning, realizing he had just met one of the finest clinical minds he had ever encountered, in faded rubber shoes with no title, on a salary that would not pay for his wristwatch. "What is your name?" he asked. "Adaeze. And you are the quiet one." Abi, the new resident who takes all the night shifts nobody wants." She smiled tiredly. "The nurses think you are strange, a man who works hard and says little and never tries to impress anybody. In this place, that makes you suspicious. And what do you think?" Adaeze considered him over the rim of her paper cup. "I think you are running from something or hiding something. But I think your hands are kind. I watched them tonight. You can tell everything about a person from how their hands behave around a frightened patient. Yours were gentle. So whatever you are hiding, doctor, I have decided I don't mind it." She had no idea how close to the truth she had walked. Emeka looked down at his terrible tea so she would not see his face. Over the next weeks, they kept finding each other, not by accident anymore. He started requesting the wards she worked. She started saving the difficult cases for the quiet resident, who actually listened. They worked side by side through long nights, and slowly the work turned into conversation, and the conversation turned into something neither of them named out loud. And from the corner of every ward, mop in hand, an old woman in a faded wrapper watched it all and said nothing. Grandma Ezin had stayed. After the lobby, she had simply kept coming, day after day, in her cleaner's disguise. And because cleaners are invisible, nobody questioned her. She mopped corridors, she wiped down chairs. She listened to everything, because people speak freely in front of those they have decided do not matter. And what she saw, over and over, broke her heart, and then slowly began to mend it. She saw Dr. Stanley Maduka humiliate junior staff for sport. She saw a senior nurse named Ijeoma trade patient favors for money, pushing paying families to the front, and leaving the poor to wait until their illnesses grew teeth. She saw the rot, clear and deep, but she also saw Adaeze. She saw Adaeze share her own lunch with a patient's child who had not eaten. She saw Adaeze stay 40 minutes past her shift unpaid, to sit with a dying man who had no family so that he would not cross over alone. She saw Adaeze treat the lowest cleaner and the richest patient with the exact same steady gentleness, as though she genuinely could not tell the difference between them, because in her heart she could not. "That one," Ezin murmured to herself one evening. watching Adaeze braid an old patient's hair just to make her feel human again. That one still has the heart I built this place with. Lord, I had almost stopped believing it still existed in these walls. She also watched her grandson. She watched Emeka watch Adaeze, and she saw the boy's careful face soften every time the nurse walked into a room, and the old woman's eyes filled, because she recognized it. She had looked at her own late husband that way, 50 years ago, in a 4-bed clinic that smelled of disinfectant and hope. So, she whispered, smiling through her tears. The king's daughter and the hidden prince. The two of you found each other without my help. Good. That is even better. That means it is real. But Ezin was not the only one watching Adaeze and Emeka grow close. Senior nurse Ijeoma was watching too, and what Ezin saw as a blessing, Ijeoma saw as a threat. Ijeoma had worked at Mercylight for 11 years, and she had decided long ago that the hospital owed her something. She was good at her job, in the technical sense. She could run a ward, manage a roster, talk her way past an angry family. But somewhere in those 11 years she had let the bitterness in, and the bitterness had eaten the care out of her until only the ambition was left. She wanted the position of chief nursing officer. It was opening soon. The current CNO was retiring, and Ijeoma had spent 2 years positioning herself for it, polishing the right shoes, flattering the right doctors, crushing anyone who shone too brightly near her. And now here was Adaeze, a junior nurse, a charity scholarship girl from nowhere with no connections and no money, and yet doctors were starting to ask for her by name. The new resident followed her around like a shadow. Even patients were beginning to request Sister Adaeze. Ijeoma could feel the light shifting away from herself, and she hated it the way only a person who has forgotten her own purpose can hate. Look at her, Ijeoma said to her small circle of loyal nurses, watching Adaeze cross the ward, acting like an angel, with those cheap shoes and that village accent. You think the board will make me CNO if a girl like that is the one everybody is praising? She is making us all look bad with her free-of-charge sainthood. Ah, but Sister Ijeoma, she works hard, you have to give her that, one of the younger nurses said. Ijeoma turned slowly. You do not know your level, so let me teach you. Some people are born to wear the white cap and sit in the office. Others are born to empty bedpans and be grateful. That girl does not know her level, and it is going to get her into trouble. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Maybe somebody should help her find it. The chance came faster than even Ijeoma planned. Mercylight, like every serious hospital, kept its controlled drugs under lock and digital record. The strong painkillers, the opioids, the medicines that take pain away and, in the wrong hands, take lives away too, were stored in a secure cabinet. Every dose removed had to be signed for, by name, with a second nurse witnessing, and every entry was logged electronically with the exact time and the exact nurse's login. This is real. Every good hospital does this, and it is called a controlled drug register, and it exists precisely because medicines this powerful must never be allowed to simply vanish. Ijeoma had access to that cabinet. She also had access, as a senior nurse, to other people's login details when they were careless, and Adaeze, running between patients, exhausted, trusting, was sometimes careless. One Thursday, a quantity of morphine went missing from the controlled cabinet. 40 milligrams. Gone. And when the electronic register was checked, the withdrawal had been logged under the login of Sister Adaeze at 2:47 in the afternoon, with no witnessing signature and no patient assigned to receive it. It was a death sentence for a nurse's career. Drug theft, the one accusation that does not just end your job, it ends your license, your name, your future, everywhere, forever. A nurse caught stealing controlled drugs never works in nursing again. Ijeoma made sure the discovery happened publicly. She raised the alarm in the middle of the afternoon shift change, when the ward was full of staff. She discovered the discrepancy while reviewing the register, and she gasped loudly enough for the whole station to hear. Morphine is missing. 40 milligrams of morphine, missing from the cabinet. She let the words land, watched the heads turn, then delivered the blade, and it was signed out under Adaze's login, Adaeze. At 2:47 today, no witness, no patient, just gone. The ward went silent. Adaeze felt the blood leave her face. That is impossible. I was in theatre at 2:47. I was assisting on the appendix case. Ask anyone. I never touched that cabinet today. The system does not lie, Adaeze. Ijioma's voice was honey poured over a knife. Your login, your name. The time stamped in black and white. Are you saying the computer is the liar, or are you the liar? I am saying I did not do this. Adaeze's voice shook, but she did not look away. I was in theatre. There are 5 people who saw me. The surgeon, the anesthetist, or you stepped out for 2 minutes. It only takes 2 minutes to open a cabinet, Adaeze's. We have all heard about nurses with money problems, charity scholarship girls, sending money home to the village, drowning in debt. Tell me, how much do you owe? How desperate are you? Ijeoma turned to the gathered staff and spread her hands like a woman appealing to a court. I do not enjoy this, but we cannot have a thief on this ward. Controlled drugs missing. This is not small. This must go straight to administration. Today. The whispers started immediately, low and ugly. Some of the nurses who had smiled at Adaeze yesterday now stepped back from her, as though theft were a thing you could catch by standing too close. And Adaeze stood in the middle of the ward, in her clean, faded uniform, feeling the floor tilt under her, watching the respect she had spent 2 years building dissolve in front of her eyes. In the corner, the old cleaner stopped mopping. Her knuckles whitened around the handle, and by the door, a junior resident named Obi went very, very still. Adaeze barely got through the rest of the shift. Administration was notified. She was told she would be suspended pending an investigation, and that the hospital's policy on controlled drug theft was, as everyone knew, immediate termination, and a report to the Nursing and Midwifery Council, the body that holds every nurse's license in its hand. A report to the council meant she would never wear the uniform again, anywhere in the country. She went home that night to the single room she rented in a crowded compound on the mainland, the room where she sent half her salary home to her mother every month. And she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, and she did not cry. Not at first. She just stared at the wall and felt her whole life, everything she had clawed out of nothing, sliding toward the edge of a cliff. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Adaeze, my daughter, how was work? You sound tired. And there, finally, Adaeze broke. Not loudly, quietly the way strong people break, with her hand pressed over her mouth so her mother would not hear. I am fine, Mama, she managed. Just a long day. I am managing. You are always managing. Her mother's voice was warm and worried across the bad line. Adaeze, listen to me. Whatever it is, and I can hear that it is something, remember what your father told you. A good name is worth more than gold, and nobody can steal a good name from you. They can lie about it, but they cannot take it. Only you can give it away. So hold it tight, my daughter. Hold your head up. You are the daughter of a king, Adaeze whispered. I know, Mama. I know. She hung up. And then she did cry, alone, in the dark, in a rented room, accused of a crime that would end everything, with no money, no connections, and no one powerful in the entire world on her side. Except that she was wrong about that last part. She just did not know it yet. Because 2 people had watched Ijioma's performance on that ward, and neither of them was poor, and neither of them was powerless, and both of them were already moving. That same night, in a part of Lagos Adaeze had never seen, Grandma Izin sat in her study with her lawyer and her grandson, and for the first time in 3 months, the old woman looked truly alive. She had taken off the cleaner's wrapper. She sat now in her own clothes, plain but well made, and the trembling old victim from the hospital lobby was nowhere to be seen. In her place was the woman who had built an empire from a 4-bed clinic, and her eyes were cold steel. Tell me everything you saw, she said to Emeka. It was staged, Grandma. Emeka had not yet fully adjusted to calling her that out loud after weeks of pretending to be a stranger to her. Ijeoma announced it in the most public way possible. She wanted an audience. A person who has truly just discovered a theft is shocked and quiet. They go to administration privately. Ijeoma performed it. She had the speech ready. She even had the motive ready. All that talk about charity girls and debts. People do not improvise motives. They rehearse them. And the log. The register said it was Adaeze. The register said Adaeze's login was used at 2:47. Emeka leaned forward, but Adaeze was in operating theatre 2 at 2:47. I have already checked. The theatre electronic record logs every staff member who scrubs in by fingerprint, not by password. Fingerprints cannot be borrowed. Passwords can. At 2:47 today, Adaze's fingerprint is recorded entering Theatre 2 for an emergency appendectomy. She physically could not have been at the drug cabinet on the 3rd floor at the same moment. It is not her word against the system, Grandma. It is one part of the system against another part of the system, and the part that uses fingerprints does not lie. Grandma Adaeze was very still. Then, slowly, she began to smile, and it was the smile of a woman who has just watched a trap snap shut on the person who set it. "So the wicked girl built her lie on a login," she said softly. "And she forgot that this hospital also keeps fingerprints, eh? She forgot that I do not build cheap buildings, Okonkwo. When I put in that theatre system 8 years ago, everybody complained it was too expensive. Fingerprint access, full audit trail, every entry, time-stamped and locked so it cannot be edited. I paid for it because I never again wanted what happened in the old clinic, when a drug went missing and we could not prove who took it, and an innocent girl was blamed. I built this exact protection so that this exact thing could never happen again." She closed her eyes for a moment, and tonight it has caught its first real thief. "Praise God, Grandma." Emeka's voice was careful. "There is something I have to tell you. About Adaeze. You love her." Adaeze opened her eyes. "You think I am old and blind, my grandson? I have been mopping floors 3 feet away from the two of you for weeks. I watched you fall. I watched her fall. I have known longer than you have." She reached over and took his hand, and her steel melted into something tender. "She defended me, Emeka, when I was on the floor, when I was nothing to everybody, a poor cleaner in dirty water. That girl knelt in the mess in her clean uniform, and she held me like I was her own grandmother, and she did not know, she could not know, that I owned the very floor she was kneeling on. She was kind to a nobody. That is the only test that has ever mattered to me, and she passed it before she ever knew there was a test." Emeka's throat was tight. "Then help me clear her name. Not as the director. Not yet. I do not want her cleared because the boss's grandson loves her. I want her cleared because she is innocent, and the evidence proves it in front of everyone who watched her be destroyed. I want the same crowd that watched her fall to watch the truth stand up, and I want them to learn something they will never forget." Grandma Adaeze looked at her grandson for a long moment, and the pride in her face was almost too much to hold. "Your grandfather would have said exactly that," she whispered. "Exactly that, with those exact words." She squeezed his hand and stood, and the empire builder was back in her spine. "All right, then we do it properly. Okonkwo, I want a full formal investigation panel convened tomorrow. I want the theatre fingerprint logs, the controlled drug register, the CCTV from the 3rd floor corridor, and the door access records for that cabinet, all pulled and preserved tonight before anyone can touch them. Quietly. Nobody is to know the order came from me. And Emeka," she turned to him, "you will stay Dr. Obi, the junior resident, until the moment I say. Let them all believe nobody important is watching. Let Ijeoma feel safe. Let Stanley keep sneering. Let them perform their cruelty one last time, in full, with the whole hospital watching. And then we will turn on the light." Emeka almost smiled. "You are enjoying this, my grandson." Grandma Adaeze picked up her old wristwatch from the table and fastened it onto her wrist, the cheap-looking watch from the lobby, and for the first time he noticed it was not cheap at all. It was old, worn thin with 31 years of wear, the only thing she had kept from the 4-bed clinic. When you have watched the good suffer in silence for as long as I have, and you finally get to watch the truth, walk into the room with its head held high, yes, you enjoy it. There is no sin in enjoying justice. The sin is in never delivering it. Meanwhile, across the city, Adaeze made a decision of her own. She would not run. She would not resign quietly to avoid the shame, which is what a guilty person does, and, too often, what an innocent and frightened one does as well. She lay awake most of that night, and somewhere around 4 in the morning, her father's voice rose up in her again. "They can lie about your good name, but they cannot take it. Only you can give it away." She would not give it away. In the morning, she got up, washed her one good uniform, ironed it with the small iron she shared with 3 neighbors, and she went back to Merseyside to face the people who believed she was a thief, not to beg, to stand. She had requested the night before access to her own records, every record connected to her shift, as was her right, and a junior administrator, half out of pity and half out of a quiet instruction that had come down from somewhere above that she would never trace, had granted it. She did not know that Grandma Azin's hand was already moving silently behind every door, making sure that every piece of evidence Adaeze needed was preserved and available and impossible to bury. Adaeze thought she was fighting alone. She was not. But the not knowing is what made what she did next so important. Because she chose to fight for the truth before she had any idea that the truth had powerful friends. She did the right thing when she believed it would cost her everything. That is the difference, the old woman would say later, between people who are good when it is safe and people who are simply good. The investigation panel was set for 10 o'clock on Friday morning in the largest conference room on the administrative floor of Merseyside. Word had spread the way it always does. The thief nurse was going to be dealt with. By the time the meeting began, the room was full, and people stood along the walls and crowded the doorway, because everyone wanted to watch. Ijeoma had made certain of the audience. She sat near the front in a freshly pressed uniform, calm and serene, a folder in her lap, the very picture of a senior nurse, reluctantly doing her painful duty. Dr. Stanley Maduka lounged in a chair with his arms crossed, there for the entertainment. The retiring chief nursing officer sat at the panel table beside the head of administration and 2 board representatives, and in the corner, with her mop and bucket, an old cleaner wiped the same patch of window over and over, watching everything. Adaeze walked in alone. She wore her ironed uniform, and she held a thin folder of her own, and she kept her head up exactly the way her father had taught her, though her heart was slamming against her ribs hard enough to hurt. Sister Adaeze, the head of administration, began, "You understand the seriousness of this. 40 milligrams of controlled morphine recorded as withdrawn under your login. No witness, no patient, no clinical justification. The hospital's policy is clear, and so is the law. If this panel is satisfied that the theft occurred as recorded, you will be dismissed today and reported to the Nursing and Midwifery Council. Do you understand?" "I understand, sir." "Then do you have anything to say before Sister Ijeoma presents the register evidence?" "Yes, sir." Adaeze's voice was steady now, steadier than she felt. "I did not take that morphine. I have never in my life taken anything from this hospital that was not mine. And before Sister Ijeoma presents the computer login, I would like to ask the panel one simple question." She looked up. "Where was my body at 2:47 yesterday afternoon?" A small, puzzled silence. "The drug register says my login opened the cabinet on the 3rd floor at 2:47, Adaeze went on. "I am not disputing that the login was used. I am telling you the hands that typed that password were not my hands. Because at 2:47, my hands were inside Operating Theatre 2, holding a retractor for Dr. Adaeze during an emergency appendicectomy on a 14-year-old boy." She opened her folder. "And theatre access in this hospital is not recorded by password. It is recorded by fingerprint. I have requested the Theatre 2 scrub-in log for yesterday. Here it is. It shows my fingerprint entering Theatre 2 at 2:41 and not leaving until 3:38. A login can be borrowed, sir. A stolen password can open a cabinet. But my fingerprint cannot be in 2 places at once. At 2:47 I was scrubbed, gloved, and standing at an operating table on the 2nd floor, witnessed by the surgeon, the anesthetist, the scrub nurse, and the runner. 4 trained professionals. Ask them." The silence in the room changed temperature. Ijeoma's serene face flickered just for a heartbeat. Then she recovered and she laughed, a light, dismissive laugh. "Logs can be confused. Times can be approximate. You are clutching, Adaeze. The drug register is clear. Your login, your responsibility. If you were careless enough to let someone use your password, that is still your negligence, and negligence with controlled drugs is. Then let us look at the corridor camera." The voice came from the doorway, heads turned. The quiet junior resident, Dr. Obi, stepped into the room. He was holding a laptop. Who called you? Stanley sneered. Sit down, Junior. This is a senior matter. You do not have the rank to. With respect, Dr. Maduka, I have the evidence. Emeka set the laptop on the panel table and turned it to face them. The third-floor corridor outside the controlled drug room has a camera. It runs continuously. I requested the footage from 2:30 to 3 yesterday. The panel should see who actually walked up to that cabinet at 2:47, while Sister Adaze's fingerprint was locked inside Theater 2. On whose authority did you pull restricted security footage? The administrator demanded. On mine. The whole room turned toward the corner. The old cleaner set down her mop. She straightened her back, and as she straightened, something about her changed so completely that people who had walked past her for weeks without a glance now could not look away. She reached up and pulled the faded scarf from her head. She unwound the cleaner's wrapper from over her own clothes and let it fall across the bucket. And she walked, slowly, with absolute authority, to the front of the room, an old woman in plain good clothes and a thin, worn wristwatch. And she stood beside the panel table as though she had always belonged there, because she had. Good morning, she said quietly. For those who do not know me, my name is Ezin Nwankwo. I founded this hospital 31 years ago. I am the chairman of its board. I own it. She let that sit. I have spent the last several weeks cleaning your floors, emptying your bins, being shoved into mop water and called a stench and a thing and ordinary. And all that time I was watching. I wanted to know what had become of the hospital I built to heal the poor. Now I know, and we are going to fix it, starting in this room this morning. The temperature in the room was not warm anymore. Stanley Maduka had gone the color of old paper. Ijioma's folder had slipped half off her lap. Play the footage, Grandma Ezin said. Emeka pressed a key. On the screen, the third-floor corridor. The timestamp in the corner read 2:46. For a moment, empty. Then a figure walked into frame, glanced left, glanced right, and stopped at the controlled drug cabinet. The figure typed at the access panel, opened the cabinet, removed something, slipped it into the pocket of a freshly pressed uniform, closed the cabinet, glanced around once more, and walked out. The face was perfectly clear. The whole room saw it at the same moment. It was Ijeoma. The sound that went through the room was not a gasp. It was lower than that, a kind of collective intake, the sound of 40 people watching a carefully built lie collapse in real time. Ijeoma was on her feet. That is doctored, that footage is fake, they have edited it. This is a setup, she pointed a shaking finger at Adaeze and then at the old woman and then at no one, because there was no one left to point at. You cannot. I have given 11 years to this hospital. 11 years. You gave 11 years, Grandma Ezin said, and her voice was not loud, but it cut through everything. And somewhere in those 11 years you decided that the people you were meant to serve were beneath you. You sold places in the queue. You let the poor wait until they were sicker. And yesterday you stole a controlled drug, logged it under the name of the one nurse in this building who still has a clean heart, and tried to destroy her in front of everyone to protect your climb to an office. You wanted to be chief nursing officer. The old woman shook her head slowly. You are not fit to empty the bedpan of the nurse you tried to ruin. She turned to the panel. The fingerprint log clears Adaeze. The camera convicts Ijeoma. The case is not difficult. She looked at the administrator. Ijioma's employment is terminated, effective this moment. The theft of controlled drugs and the deliberate falsification of records to frame a colleague will be reported to the Nursing and Midwifery Council and to the police. Because stealing opioids and framing the innocent is not an internal matter. It is a crime, and it will be treated as one. Security will escort her out now. Ijeoma was led from the room, no longer serene, no longer senior, just a woman who had forgotten what she was for and lost everything in the forgetting. As she passed Adaeze, she could not even raise her eyes. Then Grandma Ezin turned to Dr. Stanley Maduka, who had been trying very hard to make himself small in his chair. And you? Her voice could have frozen the harmattan. You did not steal a drug. Your crime is older and quieter, and, in a hospital, far more dangerous. You decided that a human life is worth a deposit slip. I watched you send a man with a heart attack out of my emergency room because he had 4,000 naira instead of 60,000. He nearly died on my doorstep. He lived only because someone with a conscience followed him out and paid the bill themselves. She did not look at Emeka, but Adaeze did, suddenly, sharply, the pieces beginning to shift in her mind. You shoved an old cleaner into mop water and called her a stench. You are clever, Stanley. You are well trained. And you have no heart at all. And in this profession, a doctor with no heart is just a well-dressed danger. You are suspended without pay, pending a full review of every patient you have turned away from this hospital. If even one of them came to harm because of your greed, you will answer for it before the Medical and Dental Council. Get out of my sight and pray that they all lived. Stanley left without a word. There were no words left for him to use. And then the room was quiet, and Grandma Ezin turned at last to the young nurse standing alone in her ironed uniform, with her thin folder and her head held high. The old woman's whole face softened. Adaeze, my daughter, come here. Adaeze walked to the front of the room on legs that did not quite feel like hers. The old cleaner she had lifted out of dirty water was the owner of everything. The morning was too big to hold. Mama, Adaeze said, and her voice cracked on the word, Mama. It was you, all this time. I am so sorry I did not know. You did not know. Grandma Ezin took both of Adaze's hands in her old ones. That is the whole point, my daughter. You did not know. You knelt in that water, and you held me when I was nothing to anyone in this building. When there was nothing I could give you in return. When helping me only cost you and gained you nothing. Do you understand what that means? The old woman's eyes were wet now, openly. It means your kindness is not a strategy. It is not a performance for people who can lift you up. It is simply who you are, all the way down. I have run this hospital for 31 years, and I have met perhaps 4 people of whom that is true. You are the 4th. She lifted Adaze's hands and pressed them once, firmly, the way you seal a promise. You are not suspended. Your name is cleared, fully, formally, on the record, in front of every person who watched it be dragged through the mud. And there will be a written exoneration in your file and an apology read to this entire staff. But that is the small thing. Ezin smiled. The big thing is this. I am creating a new office in this hospital. Director of Patient Dignity and Staff Welfare. It will have real power, real budget, and one job to make certain that no human being, rich or poor, patient or cleaner, senior or junior, is ever again treated in these walls the way I was treated in that lobby and the way you were treated on that ward. I want you to build it. I want you to run it. Adaeze stared at her. Mama, I am a junior nurse. You have the only qualification that matters, and it cannot be taught in any school. Ezin's voice was firm. I have spent enough money on people with qualifications and no heart. I am ready to spend it on a heart and let it learn the qualifications as it goes. You will say yes, my daughter. Not today, if you need time. But you will say yes, because there are patients in this city who need you to. It was at that moment that the quiet junior resident stepped forward again and set down his laptop and did the thing he had been waiting weeks to do. There is one more correction the record needs, Emeka said. He reached up and took off the laminated badge that read Dr. Emeka Obi, junior resident, and he set it on the panel table face down. My name is not Obi. Obi is my mother's name. My name is Emeka Nwankwo. He turned to Adaeze. Ezin Nwankwo is my grandmother. I am the heir to this hospital. And the medical director this board has been waiting 3 months to meet. I joined the residency under a false name, for the same reason my grandmother picked up a mop. I wanted to know what this place was, from the bottom, before I sat at the top of it. I did not expect, and here, for the first time, the careful, controlled doctor's voice was not quite steady. I did not expect to find you. Adaeze's hand had risen to her mouth. Every piece slid into place at once. The man with a heart attack who lived, because somebody found out and paid. The quiet resident who took the worst shifts and never tried to impress anyone. The kind hands around a frightened patient. The way he had moved the entire weight of this hospital, silently, to make sure her evidence was waiting for her when she came back to fight. You lied to me, she said. It was not an accusation. It was the sound of someone trying to find the flaw. I hid who I was. I never lied about who I am. Emeka took a step closer, and the whole crowded room had stopped breathing, but he was only looking at her. Every night we worked together. Every patient we pulled back from the edge. Every cup of terrible vending machine tea at 3 in the morning. That was real. That was the truest I have ever been with anyone. I was not pretending with you, Adaeze. I was hiding from everyone in this building except you. With you, the disguise was the only place I got to be myself. He took a breath. I am not asking you for anything today. You have had enough thrown at you in one morning to last a year. I am only telling you the truth, in front of everyone, the way you fought for the truth in front of everyone. The rest, all of it, is yours to decide, in your own time, with no power over you and nothing owed. Just a man who loves you, telling you so, and then stepping back to let you choose freely. And he stepped back. That Grandma Ezin would say afterward was the moment she knew her grandson had become a man worth the hospital. Not when he revealed his power. When he set it down, in front of everyone, and refused to use it to win the woman he loved. Because love that uses power is not love. It is just another deposit slip. Adaeze stood in the silence of that enormous room, and she thought about her father in the back of a taxi, and her mother's voice on a bad phone line, and a good name held tight through one terrible night, and an old woman in dirty water, and a quiet man's gentle hands. And she understood that she was, right now, standing at the exact center of her own life, and that what she'd said next sighed the shape of all the years after it. She did not give the romantic answer. Not first. She was Adaeze, and she gave the true one. I need to think, she said. I am sorry, but I do. Not because I do not feel it. Because I do, and a feeling that strong should not be answered in the same hour I was accused of a crime, and learned the whole world is upside down. If what is between us is real, Emeka, then it can survive me thinking clearly for a few weeks. She lifted her chin. And the job, Mama, the job I will take. That one I do not need to think about. There are patients who need it. I will build your office, and I will build it well. And the first thing I will do is make sure that no man with a heart attack and 4,000 naira is ever turned away from these doors again. Grandma Ezin began to laugh, a real, full, delighted laugh. The laugh of a woman who has gambled everything on her reading of a stranger's heart and just watched that heart prove her right. You see, she said to the room, to the board, to the heavens. You see what I found mopping these floors. She takes the job that helps the poor without a second of hesitation, and she makes the powerful man wait and earn her. That, my friends, is the person I want with her hand on the dignity of this hospital. She wiped her eyes. Take all the time you need with my grandson, Adaeze. He has waited 3 months to claim a hospital. He can wait a few weeks to claim a wife. It will be good for him. The room slowly began to applaud. It started with the junior nurses, the ones who had stepped back from Adaeze yesterday, and now could not look her in the eye for shame. And it spread until the whole crowded room was clapping for the poor nurse in the ironed uniform, who had walked in alone to face a firing squad, and walked out with her name, a directorship, and the love of a man she had not yet decided to keep. Adaeze did not float out of that room like a woman in a fairy tale. She walked out steadily on her own 2 feet in her cheap rubber shoes the same way she had walked in. That was the whole point of her. That was the part the fairy tales always get wrong. The weeks after were not quiet, but they were good. Adaeze took up the Director of Patient Dignity and Staff Welfare Office and threw herself into it, the way she threw herself into everything completely. She started with the things nobody important ever noticed. She got proper chairs for the cleaner's break room, where there had only been crates. She set up a confidential channel where a frightened junior nurse could report bullying, without a senior nurse standing over the form. And the very first hard rule she wrote and made the board approve became known throughout Mercilite simply as Adaeze's rule. No patient in genuine emergency would ever again be turned away for inability to pay a deposit. A patient in a true medical emergency would be stabilized first and the money sorted out afterward, through a hardship fund that Grandma Ezin endowed with the first quiet smile of pride she had allowed herself in a year. It is, in fact, the law in many places that a hospital must stabilize an emergency before asking about payment. And it exists for one reason, because a human being having a heart attack cannot negotiate, and a society that lets them die on the steps for want of a deposit has lost the thread of what medicine is for. Adaeze did not know the legal name for the principal. She only knew her father had died in the back of a taxi, and she would carry the weight of every stranger's father from now on. She also, quietly, learned. Emeka made certain that the brilliant clinical instinct she had taught herself in grief was matched by real opportunity. He sponsored her, openly and through the proper channels, for advanced training, the kind of education a charity scholarship girl could never have afforded, not as a favor from a man who loved her, but as an investment the hospital made in one of the best nurses it had. She earned every certificate. Nobody could ever say otherwise, because the records, as always at Mercylight, were complete and could not be edited. And in the middle of all that work, slowly in her own time, exactly as she had said, Adaeze let herself answer the question. It was not a grand moment. It was a Tuesday late, both of them exhausted after a long shift, sharing terrible vending machine tea, same nurse's station where it had all started, because some things you keep on purpose. I have thought clearly, Adaeze said. Emeka looked up. It survived. She turned the paper cup slowly in her hands. The feeling. I thought about it with a clear head in the daylight, with my name already cleared and the whole world the right way to up again, with nothing owed and no pressure and no morphine hanging over my career. I thought about it the way you think about a thing you are allowed to walk away from. She lifted her eyes to his. And I still want it. I still want you. Not the hospital, not the name. You. The quiet man who took the bad shifts and paid a stranger's bill and never told anyone. I choose that man. With clear eyes. On a Tuesday, over terrible tea. Emeka did not make a speech. He had learned from her the power of saying less. He simply reached across the small table and took her hand the way he had taken 100 frightened patients' hands, gently, completely, and he held it. And that was the whole of it. They married some months later. Twice, the way it is done properly. The traditional ceremony first, and then the white wedding. And Grandma Ezin wore a wrapper that cost more than the rented room Adaeze used to send money home from, and Adaeze's mother flew down from the village and cried so hard she nearly fainted and had to be fanned by 3 women. And at the reception, when it was Emeka's turn to speak, he said only this. My grandmother taught me that you can tell exactly who a person is by how they treat someone who can do nothing for them. I married the only person I have ever met who treats everyone as though they were everything. I am not lucky because she is beautiful, though she is. I am not lucky because she is brilliant, though she is. I am lucky because on the worst morning of her life, before she knew who any of us were, with everything to lose and nothing to gain, she chose to be kind. And a person who is kind when it costs them is the rarest thing in the world. I get to spend my life beside the rarest thing in the world. That is all I have to say. Grandma Ezin, in the front row, did not clap. She just sat there, an old woman in a fine wrapper with a thin, worn wristwatch on her arm, the only thing she had kept from a 4-bed clinic where she once held the hands of dying strangers so they would not cross over alone, and she let the tears run down her face without wiping them, because some tears you have earned the right to cry in public. As for Ijeoma and Stanley, the story does not end with them in chains, because real life rarely does, and the truest justice is rarely the loudest. Ijeoma lost her license. The Nursing and Midwifery Council struck her name from the register, and the woman who had clawed for 11 years toward an office she would never sit in left nursing for good. She was last heard of running a small provisions shop, and whether she ever understood what she had thrown away, or sat behind that counter and finally felt the weight of it, no one can say. Stanley Maduka kept his license narrowly, because by grace none of the patients he had turned away had died, though 2 had come terribly close. But the review put a permanent mark in his record, and the famous father whose name he had leaned on his whole life would no longer return his calls, ashamed. Stanley was made to work, for a full year, under the supervision of the very patient dignity office that Adaeze built. signing off every single emergency case to prove he had not turned one away. Whether a man like that can be changed by being forced every day to do the right thing until perhaps it stops being forced, the story does not pretend to know. But Grandma Azin insisted on the chance. "I do not build people cheaply either," she said. "Now, before you go, let me tell you the one thing I keep thinking about, long after the wedding and the music are over. It is not the romance that stays with me. It is the cleaner in the lobby. Because here is the uncomfortable truth the story is really about, the one we do not like to look at directly. Most of us are not Stanley Maduka. We do not shove old women into mop water. But how many of us truly see the cleaner, the security man at the gate, the woman who serves our food, the nurse on the night shift, the person whose name we have never once asked? How differently do we speak to the man in the suit and the man with the mop? We tell ourselves we would have helped that old woman, but 30 people watched her on that floor, and they were not monsters. They were ordinary, decent, comfortable people just like us, who had simply trained themselves over many years to not see. That is the quiet danger, not cruelty, blindness. The slow forgetting that the person beneath us is a person at all. The thing about kindness to those who can do nothing for you is that nobody is watching to reward it, which is exactly why it is the truest measure of who you are. Adaeze did not know an empire was hidden in that old woman's wrapper. She helped because a human being was on the floor. That is the whole lesson, and it is harder than it sounds. And you and I will both be tested on it tomorrow, probably before noon, by someone the world has taught us not to see. So here is my question for you, and I really do want your answer in the comments. Not as a formality, but because I am curious how your life has gone. When was the last time someone the world overlooks showed you unexpected kindness, or you showed it to them? Tell me about it below. Tell me where you are watching from: Lagos, Enugu, Abuja, Accra, London, New York, anywhere in this wide world. And if this story moved something in you, do the thing it is actually about, and be a little kinder today to someone who can do nothing for you in return. Then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with one person who needs the reminder that a good name held tight through one dark night, and a single act of kindness to a stranger on the floor can quietly change an entire life. Stay with us. The next story will move you even more.